Well, good evening and good morning, depending on who's joining from where. I hope all of you are staying home, staying safe. The situation certainly seems to be not getting any better every day, but I'm hoping that this is also an opportunity to introspect and use this time innovatively. I'm Pinkesh, and since the topic is around product management and having spent 18 years doing so, I'll kind of give two quick tips, and then since we have an elite star set of speakers today, I'll let them continue with it, and then kind of open up for more Q&A and happy to answer questions. The first myth that I uh, hear a lot, especially with folks who are new to product management, who want to move or transition into product management, is to structurally define it to begin with. And I think in the today's context, having hired many product managers, my perspective and the perspective of many others is that product management roles come in four different flavors, if you will, right? First is your inbound product management, which is everything from customer centricity, figuring out what products to build, because not every idea is worth pursuing to build a product. Not every problem is worth solving. So, which ones to solve and for whom? Making that decision, coupled with engineering instructional methodologies like Agile, Scrum, road mapping, release management, coupled with design thinking and user experience design. So, broadly speaking, this is your first role, kind of inbound product management. Then you have outbound product management, the second flavor that we see quite a bit in the industry, which is you've built the product or service. Now, how are we going to acquire that customer? What's the acquisition plan look like? What is the launch plan, the marketing plan? If it's a digital product, how are we going to apply digital tools to map the journey of the buyer, but also do certain growth hacking techniques to be able to, grow user base at scale and at the lowest possible cost. The third flavor that we see a lot, which has become very popular in the last 5 years or so, is the whole data science, data analytical driven decision making or analytics driven product management. And again, the intent here is not to become a data scientist or to acquire skills to become one on the statistical and programmatical side, but also enough applied data science to be able to not only make good decisions, but also sometimes data science itself becomes a feature, right? Data is the product in many cases. And if you don't have that understanding of applied AI, ML, applied data science, then you're at a serious disadvantage in certain kind of industries, right? So that's your third set of skills and a flavor, if you will, right? And a lot of people actually have a role called data product manager. And then the fourth one is your classic finance strategy, business model driven product management. Right? Somebody who understands profit and loss, somebody who runs product as a business, not just as a group of features, but as a business, right? Somebody who has the strategic view and can build a 3-year vision, long range portfolio management, grouping multiple products which are related to manage that as a portfolio, right? So inbound, outbound, data analytics, and business strategy and finance, right? To me, these are the flavors that what we see in the industry as one hires, and hence these are probably the necessary skills a full stack product manager needs to have. Right? So just kind of keep this in perspective. Product management comes in multiple flavors. So with that, I'll kind of pause and let others talk and possibly come in when there are questions.
I would
Thank
probably,
you.
thanks, Mikesh. I would probably add to it. This is Dharmesh. So my journey also has been fairly interesting, and if I can, extend what Pinkesh had said, right? I've gone through a lot of these flavors, so I completely resonate with what you're saying, Pinkesh. Right? I started out managing in Nokia set of feature areas to which was completely B2C product management to in Cisco B2B product management, very outbound, right? To Amazon in the ads space, managing the PNL as well as the It was very sort of data heavy as well, given that it was ad space. So to Rento Mojo, which is you know as consumer internet as it can get, right? So I completely resonate with this fact that hey, there are multiple flavors, and uh, I would say if you can and if you have sort of the various strengths, you should experiment uh, with a bit with your career and trying to see what works for you as well.
Thanks, Dharmesh. Hi, everyone. This is Varchis. Again, thanks for IPL for having me speak here. So, what I would maybe give more from my experience is I was working on a startup, uh, focusing a lot on research, primarily because it was a IAC company. And in the process, we didn't have a product manager at that time. It was 2005, 2006. And I was wearing the hat of product manager without even knowing that there was something like that. And by the time we were like facing a lot of challenges with the product, I figured out that um, I should actually do product management and get out of engineering. And later on, I did my MBA and then came back to product management. And from 2010, I've been in this field. One thing I have learned is the sense of ownership in product management is extremely high, and you should be able to do outbound, inbound data. You should be able to do multiple of these hats. Having some basic skills that will enable you to quickly change over, like even Dharmesh said, B2B, B2C, these are real challenges that you will face, and things that will help you succeed in all these varied different hats is some of these core skills that product management has that makes them like somebody which is slightly different from um, someone who thinks of only solving a customer problem than someone who's trying to solve a market problem. So I think ownership is very critical, and then I've learned it, of course, through the hard way. But I think that is something that every aspiring product manager should know. What does actually ownership mean, and how do you really get into the comfort zone of owning a product and then delivering value?
Hey, just thanks. Hi everyone, Ravi here. I've recently transitioned to product management, mainly from program management side. It's been about close to 2+ years now. A lot of you on this forum also would be looking at career transition coming from a program and a project side. Uh, what I would definitely echoing what Pinkesh said with respect to what are the different flavors which are there today. But with respect to the career transition side, uh, I would I already saw that there is a question also in that regard from one of the participant. Uh, so I would put it that you need to look at it from as a three-step process. First would be to look at the skills. The top skills what you need to have would be to have the empathy, to see the customer's problems and put yourself in the customer's shoes. Can you do that? Ability to learn, product management, like two of my all the panelists just explained, involves learning new things, doing multiple things, and taking ownership. So you would be expected to learn new things, new technologies, new buzzwords. So you should be able to pick up new things, able to listen well to the feedbacks. If you can do this, then if you have these skills, then you're ticking the first box, which is basically you have what it takes to move there into the product manager role. Then the next step would be to build some kind of an asset. We call that as demonstrable asset. Either have it running parallel if you don't have that opportunity in your company, or in the work what you do, try to demonstrate these skills, whatever we just discussed. Build some kind of an asset if you have your own website, portals, products, whatever it is. That way you are going to get that flavors a little bit and a practical experience there. That's where IPL definitely helps. And the Menaka mentioned about the journey and the building of the products, right? That definitely gives you that confidence there. And third is definitely the networking. So if you are able to do these three, you are good with respect to the career transition on the product management side.
Thanks. Taking from there, I think one of the questions which is frequently asked is, how do I get into product management? So I think at this point, it might be interesting for probably some of us to call out from a hiring manager's perspective, what are we looking at, right? So, and I have been doing this for probably 10 plus years. So probably I can talk about a hiring manager's perspective here. In terms of, hey, what are the things that we looked at, right? So as we said, there are multiple flavors. That said, I can probably say that there are three common things which I absolutely look for, right? Hard skills that come after this, but the three common things that I look for are, number one, grit, number two, communication, and number three, how sharp you are, right? So let me delve a bit into each of these, right? So when I say grit, it means how deep are you willing to go to achieve something? How passionate you are, how curious you are. Are you a person who's willing to learn a lot? If you're not super gritty, by the way, it's completely fine. You should probably join a bigger company where you don't necessarily have to do everything, right? But it's absolutely critical to have the passion and ownership, right? Number two, communication, and I would probably put this as one of the top items, right? A lot of people ask why put communication among the top spots, right? So all the work that you do, right? A lot of it depends on communication, right? Are you a great communicator, storyteller, right? Are you conveying yourself, let's say when you're brainstorming with a developer on a user journey, right? Is it getting built exactly as you have it in your head, right? When you're communicating with the senior leadership, can you articulate the vision clearly? Can you convince them that, hey, this is going to win the battle for your roadmap, right? So, you might be a great, fantastic thinker, right? But if you're not able to communicate effectively with the different kinds of people around you, you won't be a successful PM, right? It definitely helps you in meeting, helps you align people, right? Or even inspire people in tough situations, right? In some cases, you can actually help set the culture, right? So I've seen this to be a great, great differentiator. And I actually look at this as one of the top qualities. Now, the third one, right? You need to be sharp, right? You need to be able to connect the dots properly. As I said, you are discussing with pretty much all the functions in the organization, right? So you should be able to think through the short-term and long-term plans, roadmaps. You need to have problem-solving skills, right? Uh, so while all of the various hard skills, and we can get into those as well, right? These are the three things that I try to capture when I'm trying to evaluate someone, saying, hey, how good is this guy? Let's say if he's getting in fresh into this, right? Are these, yes, let's call them basic ingredients there, right? So probably the other panelists can probably chime in terms of, hey, what are they looking at?
Dharmesh, thanks. I think you have covered most of it. Um, um, the grid part is extremely critical. I would add something like decision making in the process, like how quickly can they decide. In fact, I have some kind of a case study, and then I run through that case study with them, and then look at can they decide something very quick. Um, Having said that, I just want to take one question, if that is okay, Menaka, because we'll also try to see how we can close all of the questions. There was one question on BA, business analyst to product management, and I've seen quite a few people who have transitioned in my earlier organization too, and basically it is a good, I would say, path. Seems like a logical path where you're a business analyst and then you go into a, a role of product manager. One of the, I think, the difficulties I see with business analyst getting into product management is they're extremely focused on solving a few customers' problem, which boils down to uh, being a business analyst. You look at the details, the business side of what the customer is having, what exactly is their infrastructure, what exactly is their pain point, and then you come up with a solution that can help them, kind of overcome these with the solution that you're offering. Product management has a different hat. They don't look at individual client problems as a problem to be solved in the product. You basically wear a slightly different hat to see what kind of market problem are you trying to address, and are various customer requirements forming under what is called as an umbrella of a target user or a target segment, and how would you go after? So one is the input side of it, which says which is the target that you have to go after, and the other is a go to market plan where you'll actually go after such clients and such problems and not invite any problem that you see the customer comes and throws to you. So you have to be very careful when you move from a BA role to product management role, especially removing the hat that you have to solve every customer problem that comes to you, which is generally a very core skill for a BA, whereas that is not one of the important skills that you should hone when you are in product management.
Yeah, maybe to add on to what Virtus said, uh, that can actually lead you to build a product just for that one particular customer. You might be going in that direction and then end up building something which can be a one-off build. So we need to be really careful, and as a product manager, you need to be you need to take emotions out and try to see, is this something which is a big enough problem? How many other customers are willing to have the same amount, have the same problem, and how big is the problem? You might end up uh, a lot of the cases, like Steve Jobs said, right? Sometimes customer doesn't even know what the problem is. Sometimes you might even have to tell them the problem is, or sometimes they say what is the problem, but you end up building it and then you realize that that's no more a problem for them. All right. So you need to be very, very clear for it and just don't go by what customer says. That's very easy to do if you're coming from a project and program management side, because that's what you're trying to do to address the scope and things. But product management is little bit different, where you need to look at it from a hat of a CEO to see how big is the problem, and is there a big enough market for it, and how many or which market and who and everything else, and how many other customers have similar enough problems which you can this is going to be addressing that.
Thank you so much. So we are a word to the attendees. We are getting a lot of questions, and I'm sorry that we are not able to unmute each one of you, because that won't do justice to each one of your questions. So I request the speakers to see the Q&A window. We have a lot of questions, and there is no we don't have to follow any kind of a rule or anything here. Each one of you are a specialist in one thing or the other. Please feel free to go ahead with any question you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, maybe Ravi here. I'll take a couple of questions on the Q&A window. There are questions both in the Q&A and chat, so I'm going to go with the Q&A. First couple of questions. One is about moving from support to a product management role. I think we already touched a little bit of that. If you look at it, there is no stopping from you moving to the role of PM. If you are able to have those three things, what I mentioned, and if you're able to build a sufficient enough demonstrable asset, if you're able to show that you have those skills, I think you would be able to make that jump. It will be a little bit tough because that not be a straight transition path. So you might have to spend a little more effort to build those skills and actually have that as a demonstrable thing which you can show and which people can see. And then it should not be a challenge. Second one, I would just like to take that because that's about more difference between product management and program management. This is a little close to me because I've been I've moved this. I've had this journey. Here we touched a little bit on this topic. Program management, like I said, right? You're managing the overall program to make sure different pieces are there and the projects are running, and they're trying to see the resource loading and things like that, right? Whereas product management is looking at it from a product side. The difference would be you are going to focus on a lot more new areas in the product management. What Pinkesh said with respect to the trying to see even identifying the problems, to validating the problems, to coming out with a value proposition and then building it, having the go-to-market plan and everything else, right? You're going to be more hands-on and you're going to be owning it up end to end. Whereas program management would be mainly to see the different programs or the projects running in and making sure they are able to meet their defined scope.
Thanks. I'll probably take up the third one, which is, what are the key qualities of a great product manager, right? So when I'm evaluating PMs, I essentially try to evaluate them along 4 lines, right? Let me call this out. Number 1 is product thinking. Number 2 is impact and execution skills. Third is leadership. Fourth is tech debt. Let me elaborate on each of these, right? So when I'm talking about product thinking, right, I'm talking about, hey, do you start with customers first, right? You understand them via both anecdotes and data, right? Do you internalize what matters the most for your company, right? And build this focus to avoid distractions for yourself and your team, right? Are you able to define a North Star for your product area and build towards it, right? Are you always striving to, seek the truth, right? Very, very focused on the customer and the data part of it, right? So that's pretty much, what is product thinking, right? It's a combination of user centricity and business objectivity, right? Which helps you define a vision for your product area and build towards it. That building of the clarity. Number 2, impact and execution. So as a great PM would be focused on moving the needle, right? A great PM would be setting ambitious goals that align with the company's OKRs, right? Assuming you have an OKR culture, right? Unlocking the potential of the teams, right? You need to inspire the team because these guys are not reporting to you, right? You need to get stuff done, right? Are you immersing yourself in the details, removing all the obstacles, getting the right set of discussions going, right? Without hesitation, right? Ensuring that, the teams are always aligned, never blocked, ensure you have the right set of data. And if you don't have the data, are you taking informed risks and ensuring that your decisions are right more than wrong, right? Always sort of raising the bar in terms of speed of execution and balancing it with the quality and radical innovation that you can probably bring in, right? So essentially, a great PM is a guy who really knows how to get stuff done. Very important, right? Uh, Third one, leadership, right? Are you inspiring through ownership, communication, and are you bringing energy, enthusiasm to the table, right? Are you increasingly sort of inspiring others to take up bigger challenges? Are you a one-person show? Or are you effectively, essentially leading, motivating, and growing high-performance teams, right? So essentially, a great PM, a great leader would foster efficient collaboration across teams, across stakeholders, etc. And the fourth one, which I called out, a great quality to have is the PM needs to have tech depth, right? A PM needs to be able to understand various aspects, right? And understand them enough so that you, let's say, get the respect of the engineers, the data scientists, the designers, etc. Right? You need to be able to collaborate well with these guys, and in some cases even suggest improvements to architecture if that makes sense, right? Because the more you understand the limitations, the more you understand the capabilities of the product that you're handling, that will enable creation of magical experiences, right? In the absence of that, any engineer, any sort of data scientist would not listen to you, and that essentially defines or separates a good PM from a great PM, right? So, if I were to summarize, product thinking, impact, execution, leadership, tech depth, right? Four things that you need to excel in to be a great PM.
Thank you, Dharmesh. We have a lot of questions, so I'm not sure where to pick.
So, Menaka, there was one question person by name Subodhkar has requested, and I think there was a couple of others who have asked a very similar question, which is service-based industry moving towards a product-based. I think the short answer is this is one of the toughest, I would say, journeys towards product management. If you're in a product company in a role like engineering, in a role like BA, because of the kind of product thinking you have within an organization, the kind of culture that is there, it helps a lot in identifying some of the challenges in product lifecycle, in understanding the customer, and how do we, like, iteratively provide product releases that solves the market problem. So this entire product lifecycle is such an engine. And when you come from the service side of it, the toughest is to understand the nitty-gritties of product management. And these are more functional skills that I would say, which is like, you really have to go through it. You have to experience that no matter how much of reading, how much of YouTube you listen, if you're with the engineering and engineering is asking you to do something, or if you're with sales, sales is saying, I want a licensing document, unless you have worked with a product culture, product organization, it's very difficult to like immediately get why it is important. So I think the hardest is the functional skills, but the good part is with some proper guidance, if you have some good mentors, you can definitely get this. I don't think it's a challenge. My primary challenge with a lot of product managers that I've seen is on the soft skills, is on the skills that somehow they think that the ownership is not theirs, and then somebody in the pipeline of people around can point out and then tell the product manager, hey, something is going wrong, why don't you do something, etc. So a lot of it is soft skills, a lot of it is communication, a lot of it is listening, a lot of it is decision making and moving forward. uh, those are some of the things that uh, you know have somebody uh, has a product management thinking which is very strong, that you will definitely see success coming from them. So my suggestion to Subodh and others are, if you really are interested, don't lose hope, don't think it is not possible, but ensure that it's a be assured that it's a tough ride. So, just take the challenge and move forward.
Thank you, Archas. In the chat window also, I see some questions on data-driven product. Did we take that? So maybe we can club these questions together if there are similar questions, as you rightly said.
Yeah, there are many questions. So I'll try to take a shot at question from Rahul and Harita. Rahul is asking about how to hone the skills on data science and AI ML and see how one can implement and learn and implement the same if they don't have the background. I think this is where Rahul, I talked about the ability to learn and up to what level. I think Dharmesh already talked about it, that you should be able to talk in that language with the data scientist or your team of people who are going to be doing the work for you. So for that, the courses what is available from the Institute of Product Leadership or any other Coursera or any other online courses should be able to give you that kind of a kickstart into the basics and the terminologies and how the data science works, how the model is being built, what are the different steps and things like that. So you should be able to be comfortable with respect to the terminologies and the process. Definitely, you don't have to be the one who is actually implementing it. You would have a data scientist or somebody whom you will work with. But if you're able to understand how the technologies or the processes, you would be able to define what you're looking at and able to have that discussion with him with respect to the terminologies and the lingo. That should be good enough there. Another question is from Harita. She's talking about the difference between a product manager and product owner. So here, I think Pinkesh talked about inbound product manager and outbound product manager, right? So mostly being a product owner, you would be mostly focusing with respect to the you'll be the face to the engineering team or the technical team to help to elaborate the product features and try and help them to build the product as per what is already defined. That would be the role of a product owner. But product manager goes one step ahead, where you would do a little bit more with respect to defining the identifying the problem, defining the value propositions, and what is the market looking like, which market you should go, how should be the go-to-market plan, and things like that. So it will have a flavor of both the inbound product management as well as outbound product management.
I'll probably add to that. Um, in one of my first stints in Nokia, it was a interesting situation where we had both product managers and product owners. So I think firstly, it's important to set the context, in terms of, hey, where do we see the role of product owners? Because it's definitely not there in all the organizations, right? In some organizations, you have only product manager, and there are no product owners per se, right? So the expectation from a product manager is more around what are the problems that we need to solve. And I emphasize the word problem, right? What are the customer problems we need to solve? That is one of the key things that you would like to figure out. Whereas a product owner is more in the execution realm and in the context of a particular team, right? A product manager may or may not have a team associated. A product owner is directly embedded into an engineering team, typically, right? And is responsible to say, hey, this particular sprint or this particular whatever time window, we are going to execute on these because these are the set of inputs I've received from XYZ set of people, right? So it's in the context of a particular team. So it's very important to understand why these roles sort of came into being.
Thank you, Dharmesh and Ravi. Also, see, we have a lot of questions on the chat window also. And to the attendees, if you want to direct any particular question to any particular speaker, also please mention it in the chat window or Q&A window. To be honest, I'm lost on the questions, so I'm totally dependent on the speakers.
Yeah, I'm looking at only the Q&A window. Too many Q&A window gives us an option to highlight that it's done, so that
Yes.
we can track it a little bit better. I think there was a question with respect to the hardware product manager working on mechanical robotics kind of a product. How can I transition into being a whole product manager and not just to a hardware oriented product manager? I don't know what is that you're trying to ask with respect to a whole product manager. Product, anything what you're building, even if it is a hardware itself is a product also. That also needs to go through the journey with respect to what we talked about. That would also involve why are you building that product, to whom are you building, how big is the market, and things like that. So you'll have to go through all those steps. It doesn't matter whether you're building a hardware product or it's a software code which you will ship at the end, or an application which you're using. But the concept, the product management method, concepts and the process is the same. So in terms of identifying the need, to the building of a MVP, to validating it, to go to market, launching product financials, everything. So all that need to be done. Hardware, it's a lot better. You can actually see the product building. You can, a lot of the cases, actually the other way around, people ask the question that I cannot see anything what I'm building, right? But in your case, you're able to see it. So it should be a lot more exciting journey there.
I'll add to this is a very interesting question, and while the core product management concepts and skills remain the same, I would articulate there are differences, of course, right, in terms of the the day to day. Now, a hardware PM, right, unlike let's say a consumer internet PM, right, a hardware PM has to focus a lot more on market research, on figuring out customer needs, because unlike a consumer internet guy, it's very difficult for a hardware PM guy to say, hey, I will release it and then I will experiment with it on the fly, right? I cannot do that, right? The experimentation is a lot tougher, right? There are huge release cycles. A consumer internet PM, right? It's like there's a change on the website. Hey, we'll just run an A/B test and figure out what the customers say, what the data says. So that sort of changes your day to day. The another sort of critical difference is that a product life cycle, typically of a hardware product, is a lot longer compared to, let's say, a consumer internet, right? I am not going by the term whole product manager. I don't really understand that. I would simply say, hey, there are different businesses and there are different life cycles of a business. A hardware product, by just the way it is, typically takes a lot longer. So your product release cycles are a lot longer, but there is a huge cost associated to shipping a wrong hardware product, right? A huge cost compared to shipping, well, a buggy software on the internet which can be updated, right? So some key differences in terms of how it will impact your day-to-day, in terms of how you would interact with all the stakeholders, how risk averse or risky they would be, etc.
Thanks, Dharmesh. So let me take a few that I thought were very similar. It's to do with the engineering to product management, which is one, and the other is how do you deal with many other stakeholders, and what is it that product managers should do and should not do. And this, I think, is a very good question, and Um, the best way the product manager has to collaborate with each of these teams. I think also Dharmesh or Ravi mentioned this, which is how can you build a product team culture that gets the best out of each of the team members. So what I mean by that is many times, even when I was in engineering and then moved to product management, the first thing I would do is to go and solve the problem. Like, I'll go and tell the engineering, this is the problem, this is the solution, go and do it. It's like the requirement is the solution itself, like, because I know what it takes. But of course, if you look at it from the engineering side, they have to deal with multiple other issues like scalability, and then you have to think about again, okay, what is the pro of this, what are the cons of this. So it gets into so much of discussion because you're not getting the best out of who has to do what. So over a period of time, you'll get to know that you have to enable engineering to do their best, which is you give them a problem, don't give them a solution. You give them a requirement, explain the requirement as detailed, but as simple as possible. So these are some of the things which are hard, but over a period of time, once you start discussing these details with engineering, you'll get to know what is the best fit for this with your teams. The same thing goes with various other teams like the design team, the support team, the sales and development team, the marketing team, every other team. You are such a core, like the orchestrator of all this. You'll have to time these things extremely well, but you also have to enable them to do their best. So I think that is very critical. There are no, there are no set boundaries here, but the boundary you will set by enabling your team members to function very good in their role, and you'll do whatever is possible from your end to help one the product as well as the people around there to be successful. I don't know if it answered some of the questions there. I hope it did.
Hey,
Varshit,
thanks.
thank you. Before we move on to the next question, please put your questions in the Q&A window so that we don't miss it out. Still, we say that so many times, but still we see questions on the chat window. Please put it on the Q&A window.
Yeah, thanks, Menka. I would like to take a couple of questions there. I think one I saw with respect to moving from sales to product management. Uh, I think that's a very nice and interesting transition if you're able to do it. Definitely, not many have done that. But I have at least known some people, at least one person I know who has done this. They bring in a completely new perspective to the product management. Uh, the sales guys are wired differently. They look at the problem differently, and how that can be how it can be sellable. That's again, that also matters, right? So irrespective of whatever you build, finally you will have to sell it also. Either you help them to sell it, or sometimes you might even have to pitch in to see how it can be sold better. And sales guys do bring in the criterias or the value add with respect to how to sell the product, what should be the wordings there, and how we can look at the problem differently from a salesperson point of view. So I think that's a very good. It's not a straight through transition. You might have to put in a little more effort, but definitely if you're able to do it, that's going to be a really different perspective to the product management. Similar to another question which I saw was with respect to UX, something similar. Recently, I've seen a lot of UX guys moving into product management side. They do bring in that creative thinking into the product management. They are able to articulate the problem a lot better, and help in that design thinking and try to identify the value propositions and things. And anyway, if you're able to design the product well, and these guys can contribute to that also. So these two are definitely UX especially is I've seen a lot of people moving from UX to product management. So there is definitely a hot area there. Um, Another one question which I saw was, is MBA required to move into product management? Uh, Again, there's no hard and fast answer for that, but definitely it helps. The reason why many people ask for MBA is with the MBA, you would be exposed to different aspects of the business, from marketing to finance to in this case product management to everything, because like we've been saying till now, right? As a product manager, you will have to manage the complete product, from not only to defining what the product should be with respect to the value propositions and things, but even the market where you need to sell, how you should price it, what's going to be your financials, what profit are we looking at, what's going to be the profit at the end of the first year, when are we going to break even, all of that. So having a finance knowledge and a marketing knowledge is definitely going to help. And MBA gives you that gives you exposure to these areas. So definitely it helps. But again, it's not mandatory. I've also seen a lot of PMs who are not BAs as such. The last one, which I'll take before I hand over to others, would be a question what I saw with respect to demonstrable assets. What is that? So demonstrable asset is something what you can build or you need to build to show the skills of product management, what we discussed with respect to problem identification or go-to-market plan or value proposition design or financials, anything, right? How can you show that you have that skills? Either you have to demonstrate in your day-to-day work. If you're able to do that, then yes, well and good. That's your demonstrable skills, right? You're able to talk about it. But if you're not able to do that in your day-to-day job, like let's say you're coming from a project management background, how are you going to build that, right? So you'll have to then say how are you able to identify the customer problems in your work. So you'll have to give examples there and see how you were able to help that, how you were able to define financials for a product in your one of the projects. So were you able to do that? So in any other different way, right? Or did you take out of your own? Did you have anything which you were able to do something? Maybe you take a UX review. So you were able to do a UX analysis of something and give your feedback, right? What did you observe? What was working? What was not working? Things like that. Or even your own website. So a lot of people nowadays have their own website where they talk about new different things. They talk about their views. We talk about technology. Talk about reviews. All of that. So it each of them is going to help to validate some of the skill set what a product manager needs to have.
Thank you. We have one question for Pinkesha. So, what kind of side projects can I do as an aspiring product manager to learn and develop some kind of portfolio? This is from Abhinav.
Sure. I was the number of questions and the variety and the depth of the answers were so good. So I was just enjoying trying to get my chance, but I really didn't need to have peek in. I'll answer a few questions that I also heard over the last few minutes to try and um, engage as well. But starting with the question that was asked, to me, uh, I think as Dharmesh also said earlier, the grit, the ability to persevere, the ability to keep on working on something, bring a novel way of looking at it, are all important things. But the problem is, unless you have a way to demonstrate that, it's very difficult. It's almost hit and miss. Um, in the 30 minutes interview to be able to prove all of that, right? I mean, if you look at all the responses that all of us have given you, it almost feels only slightly short than a superman or a superwoman that this person has to be. Now, and even if you are, how do you prove that in 30 minutes or less, right? Assuming that you even get the shot to get that interview. So what we've seen work in a very predictive way, right? Now, of course, you can get lucky without doing any of this, but the most predictable way of cracking into this is to do what I think Ravi also talked about is a portfolio. You know, how do you demonstrate the skills, the leadership skills, the product skills, the functional skills, the domain skills? How do you demonstrate all of that in the fastest possible way, in a tangible way, is the key question. And now that demonstration of portfolio can happen in multiple ways, right? You know, a typical program will force you through assessments, assignments, internships, industries projects, skill hackathons to produce that portfolio, right? Because you know, in an assessment, you will be asked to build a real prototype. Learning user experience design is one thing. Um, Understanding and speaking the vocabulary is one thing, but to be able to produce one for a given situation, for a given company, in the prescribed time, is a true test of skill. Now, while programs may allow you to do that very efficiently in a structured way, there are non-program ways, right? You don't have to go join a business school to do that. You know, the easiest thing is to go volunteer at a startup. You know, go spend your weekends. You know, assuming that you've built the skills first, go spend the weekends with a startup. You know, help a fellow startup in volunteering. You know, building a business model, everything from a growth hacking model to a user experience prototype to a product roadmap to doing some customer research and you know, analyzing 500 responses of a survey into a cohort analysis or a conjoint analysis. There are multiple ways to go build that portfolio. You know, 10,000 startups in NASCOM. There are thousands of startups in Bangalore, if you are in Bangalore or in Pune or in different parts of the world. And you know, you just have to find one or two who interests you and start volunteering. Don't ask for money. Instead, ask for the opportunity. And I think once you have that portfolio, it's the fastest way, the most predictable way to crack the interview. In my opinion, in the opinion of many others, you know, resumes are dead. So my recommendation is do not waste, you know, disproportionate portion of your time in decorating your resume. Um, and when I say decorating the resume, not just visually, I also mean these three-letter words that everybody seems to be very busy acquiring, right? You know, PMP and CSPO and CSM and ITIL and Black Belt, and there are many. I don't think those things matter in the context of the broad scheme of things in product management. I think a hiring manager wants to see skills. Doing an MBA, I think in some sense is also important, but not critical. Uh, you know, there are lots of people who cracked into an MBA, into a product management role without an MBA. But the point is not an MBA or not an MBA. The point is not certification or not certification. The point is building skills. And number two, developing a portfolio to demonstrate those skills. So if an MBA gives you that, great. If your certification program is allowing you to do that, great. Um, but the three-letter word alone is not going to be enough, right? So that would be my recommendation. And there are multiple ways of volunteering. Pick a project. You know, start designing the mobile app for Rento Mojo. Now that you have Dharmesh here on the call, I'm sure Dharmesh wouldn't mind. You know, if 10 of you, put together what you think is a better mobile app, a better user experience, what you think is a better flow, and share it with Dharmesh. You know, who knows? He may actually like one of yours and even offer you an opportunity to interview. And even if he doesn't, that's fine. You at least put together something that's a true demonstration of skills, right? So I'd say start experimenting and start building A, skills, and B, the portfolio to demonstrate. Um, so that would be my quick response. Now there's a couple other important things that I think you know I picked up, and I think many of them got answered very well by the panelists. One thing to add to that transition question, how do you make that transition? I think Varchas talked a lot about the leadership skills. Um, Ravi talked about the functional transition going from sales to product management, absolutely doable. Engineering to product management, absolutely doable. Hundreds of people have done that. Thousands of people have done that, I would say. Um, Business analysts, pre-sales, user experience designers, project and program managers, all of this is a routine thing, right, to be able to make that transition. One important thing that somebody asked also is about the domain. And let me see if I can share a graphic. There's an insight that I always share with the class as well. Is that okay if I share my screen, Menka?
Please do, please do.
So, one thing that's I think important to visualize is this insight of how people kind of get and grow into senior roles, right? How do they get into those senior roles, and how do they kind of grow? And I think broadly speaking, there are three vectors of evaluation. Whether the hiring manager explicitly mentions this or not, in the job description, invariably they are looking at you in these three lens. As I've hired hundreds of product managers in my professional life, I've looked at the same three lens. Right? First is your leadership lens, and these are not in order of priority. This is just three things. Right? The priority will depend on who's the hiring manager in some sense, and what type of company and culture do they prescribe. But invariably, there will be all three. So one is your leadership, right? Everything that everybody has talked about already. Your art of storytelling. Can you tell an amazing story? Can you convince stakeholders, customers, sometimes management team, board members? If you're an entrepreneurial venture, can you convince your venture capital folks, your investors? So there's a lot of leadership skills that one should not assume that you already have. You need to practice and you need to build if you don't have, right? But presenting in a PowerPoint is not what I'm talking about, art of storytelling, right? You may have a lot of data, but you may not have a great story. Conflict management, negotiations. These are all very crucial skills. Executive presence. If somebody's not going to take you seriously, and if you're not going to be able to influence people around you, then you're going to be a very, very, useless product manager in some sense. Even though you get in the title, you will never be respected. You'll never have the influence. You never command that respect. And when you request something, when you set the stage, set the vision for someone, people may not agree because your ideas are great, your credibility is not. So leadership is a very important bucket. Second is your functional skills. Everything we've talked about, inbound, outbound, data, analytics, pricing, packaging, right? Strategy, portfolio, profit and loss. All of these are decision-making vectors, decision-making frameworks that essentially helps you make better decisions across the life cycle, right? From introduction of the product to the growth, to the maturity, to when you end of life. All of those decisions that one has to make, you need better frameworks to make better decisions, and all of that is your functional skills. Very, very important. And third, also not to be ignored, is the domain skills. And unfortunately, domain cannot be taught. In my opinion, no business school, no college, no university can teach domain. You have to kind of spend time, in that industry to really absorb, grasp, uh, and and digest some elements of domain. Now, many of you are fast learners, so hence you may be able to switch from one domain to another domain quickly and quickly learn it. But unless you spend some time, you will not have the depth. And so now, if you look at it, a hiring manager
Yeah.
looks at all three lens, right? Um, they will look at the lens of, are you a 9 out of 10 on leadership? Are you a 9 out of 10 on functional? And which means if you're only a 3 out of 10 in domain, right? Which means, in fact, Dharmesh mentioned a very interesting thing. He was at Nokia, which is a telecommunications company, and then now he's in Rento Mojo, which is a consumer internet company. Two very different animals, and yet he's able to make that shift. He's able to grow, and many of us have done this. By so so you can switch domain absolutely, whether it's from healthcare to e-commerce, or whether it's going from medical to manufacturing. You can make that switch. But when you make that switch, please ensure that you are a 9 out of 10 on the other two boxes, right? Because your aggregate score has to kind of be impressive. So keep that perspective. I think the second question that somebody asked, I think, was the whole career path. This is typically what we share, uh, with most participants in terms of their own career path planning, right? And so in some sense, this is the ladder that kind of goes straight and goes very fast, very vertically, aligned in the few initial years of your growth, and then it kind of goes, in a more slanted way to become a more towards more strategic side. So if you notice, you start with a TPM, an associate PM, a technology PM, a junior PM, right? Different titles depends on the company that you work for, and these are roles, by the way. I'm not referring to titles. Titles are very creative. I think in all parts of the world, in India in particular. So don't go by titles. Go by the roles of what people do, and what you're expected to do. But if you notice now, most product managers eventually, become like an SVP, like the two of our panelists that you see here today, and eventually CEOs. Most product managers are eventually becoming general managers or CEOs because they've already practiced managing a, a product as a mini CEO. And so now it's very natural for them to be a cross-functional leader, a cross-functional specialist, as we call it, which is nothing but a CEO. In fact, there are many such examples that you will see in the last 7 years, 5 to 7 years as well. In fact, more product managers are now getting to Fortune 1000 company CEO spots than ever before in the history of mankind. Right? So this is fascinating. 20 years ago, one profession dominated the entire Fortune 1000 companies. If you look at the CEOs, and if you look at their history of where they came from, what was their background, there was one profession who dominated, and that was sales. If you look at now, in the last 7 years, there is one profession who's dominating, and that's usually your CTO, your product management, product leadership type of roles are making it to the CEO, right? And so this is kind of important to keep that perspective, even when you look at the career paths, even when you look at how do you make that transition, because getting into the role is one thing, growing into that role is a very important thing as well, right? Otherwise, very very quickly you get stuck in that chain by not skilling yourself to this full stack product management that we talked about. So just want to share that perspective for those 3 or 4 questions that I saw.
Thank you so much. We have gone a little past the time, but we still have some questions. What would you suggest we do? I hope the speakers can take 1 or 2 questions. I see some questions specifically for Dharmesh and Varchas also. So before we close the session, I just want to share one thing with you attendees. So please see your chat window in this lockdown period to help with the Corona Relief PM Fund. We are sharing our best e-learning programs for just a very small amount of $1. So please see the URL. All the proceeds they go directly to the PM Fund. So sharing this with you. And so Pinkesh and do we have time for one or two questions or?
Yeah, happy
not-
to, happy to. I think if you can pick, it's at least for me, it's very hard to sift through a lot of these. And by the way, we can take a lot of these questions even offline, in the sense that if you compile them, happy to. I'm sure all of us would be happy to answer them on the LinkedIn thread or individually, even if we couldn't address them today. But I'm happy to take a few more. I don't know about you, Dharmesh.
Yeah, happy to. I have 10 minutes. So
Sure.
Meenakshi, if you can, call out let's say a couple of questions, we can probably take them.
Sure. So there are, let's look at the chat window also because we missed out a lot of questions there. Um,
So I'll see this one thing that I have seen consistently in today's session as well in some of these questions. How do you know if you're ready, right? One is what you need to know to make that transition. I think we've discussed quite a bit of how to make that transition. We've discussed quite a bit on what is product management. We've discussed quite a bit on who all uh, which pretty much the short answer is everyone, right? Anyone can become a product manager. I remember, I've hired product managers completely from a music background. I had one of my product managers that I hired in California had nothing to do with technology, even though we are a security software company. And I hired him from a music background. Why? Because while the domain expertise was not very strong for this individual, the other two, the leadership and the functional skills, were excellent. And at that time, I had enough people who had enough domain expertise already on my team, right? So I was not really looking to have high weightage on that third circle as well. And so these are important things to understand. Anybody can become a product manager with the right passion, understanding, and a structured approach to kind of crack it. But one thing that maybe we haven't talked about in today's conversations is what level of or what level of depth do we need to have in anything we learn. And I kind of refer to the learning diagram for executives. I don't know, guys. I don't know if you guys have seen the exec diagram. Let me see if I have a quick slide to visually show. If not, I'll verbally explain. Yeah, actually, I have it here. So this is how the kind of layers of knowing falls in, right? And there are 4 layers. Whenever we say that I know something, or I want to know something, or I want to learn something, it usually falls in 4 layers. First is what we call awareness. Am I aware of the topic, the trends, the industrial buzzwords in that area, right? So let's say if it's product management, do I understand the buzzwords of product management? If it's user experience design, if it's data science, you pick anything. Do I understand the context of, broadly speaking, what people talk about in that area? So that's awareness. Second is literacy. Not only do I know the buzzwords, I can actually use them. I can build conversations and sentences, around it. So, if you're in e-commerce, then you need to know what is a GMV, metric look like, because your life depends on it. And everybody's talking at the water cooler, uh, you know, including the engineering leader. He's also talking about this business metric called GMV, because that's how e-commerce operates. Now, if you're not in e-commerce, you may not know what is GMV, perhaps, right? And no big deal. Gross merchandise value, GMV. If you do a quick Google search, in 15 seconds you'll figure it out. But the point is, you can create conversations, but it's a literacy level, which is better than awareness because it's kind of deeper. Now you go one level deep, there's a skill level. Now, skill level is what we've been talking about. I think is what Dharmesh was referring to. I think in many ways is what Ravi was talking about. Is you need to build skills, not just awareness or literacy. So when you say that you know something, you need to know at a skill level. You need to be able to apply that knowledge, that buzzwords, that literacy, that awareness, that framework in any contextual condition that may appear at workplace. And if you can do that successfully, repeatedly, reliably, At that point, you have skill, right? So cooking, if you look at cooking, right? Some people know that something is wrong with this pizza because it has excess salt or excess, uh, you know, spice. But very few people know how to fix that excess salt or excess spice. And those who do will go beyond literacy into what we call skill building, right? So the ability to solve a problem using that knowledge, frameworks, best practices is really what's critical. So keep that perspective in mind. Keep that problem solving mindset. Keep that demonstrability of that skill before we claim that we know something. And this is a big blind spot for a lot of us. I have this blind spot in my own personal life. My wife asked me the question, you know, do you think you're healthy? And my answer is with a broad smile, of course, yes. Look at me, right? And then, very quickly the blood test shows borderline diabetes. So, so we always need sometimes a third party, objective evaluation to know that, look, do I really know something at an awareness level, or is it a literacy level, or is it a skill level? So keep this perspective in mind as well. Many of you may know a lot of things, uh, but all of those may not be at a skill level. And if it's not at a skill level, it is going to be very, very difficult in terms of predictability to be able to crack that into that profession. Yeah.
Thanks, Vikesh. I think one more thing I would like to add there is what I have seen is I think the learning never stops. So keep an open mind. Uh, be very humble as you, of course, grow into the product management world. Um, and just know that, hey, there are 10 other guys who are much, much better than you. So I would say keep learning. I think that's the only way you'll be, you'll be able to succeed and continuously grow. You're never
Yeah.
going to know everything. So
No, very, very well said. I think this is one other personal pet peeve of mine, especially when I interact with participants in India who are fairly senior also, right? 7+ years of experience. And when I ask them, what percentage of your wealth have you invested back in you? It sounds a very simple question. And most people don't have a good answer to a simple question. So, by the way, just so you know, in United States, we have this, unwritten and yet most practiced rule that 10% of everything you earn every year goes back as an investment in you, right? So it's not a big number, it's just 10%, but that has to happen every year, which means, and that investment can go in any which way. You can go join some workshop, you can join some program, or you can just go buy a bunch of top rated books, recommended 15 books from Flipkart, in that area of your interest, and start reading. You could join some events. You can subscribe to Harvard Business Reviews and trade magazines in your area, right? But the point is, 10% of your wealth, whatever that is, anywhere from 10 lakhs to 1 crore, has to go back. That 10% of that CTC has to go back in you. And I think this is where I think what Dharmesh is saying, that learning never stops. Make sure that you don't fall in this trap that you learned something 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and somehow it's going to continue to nurture you and have you help you for the next 15. It may, but you're significantly shortchanging yourself, because the world is moving very fast. The skills needed in the market are moving very fast. And in some sense, you have to kind of shape up and skill up continuously.
Thank you. Thank you, Dharmesh, Ravi, and Pinkesh. So I guess our people also want to leave the attendees. So maybe we can stop the session here, but we are very happy to see so many questions and the interest you guys are showing in learning and understanding the concepts. We will try our best to make sure that the answers to these questions are available for you. And please keep watching our events page. We're coming up with many more exciting opportunities for conversing with great